Now let's talk about infertility and obesity. So obesity and the link to infertility. We are joined by the president of Kenya.
Stop there.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Stop there, and it's still factual.
The president of Kenya Obstetrical Gynecological Society. Dr. Kireki Omanwa, good morning.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
It's good to have you again in the Situation Room.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here.
Karibu tena. Wanjiru Gekonyo is our guest host. You know Wanjiru. Everybody knows Wanjiru. All presidents in Kenya have interacted.
If all presidents know her, then I also know her.
Yes. Know me today.
Yes. They do. You're also a fertility specialist. What's a fertility specialist? I can see the OBGYN bit. What's a fertility specialist?
A fertility specialist. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to come to this program once again. And basically, when you talk about a fertility specialist, this is somebody who has gone through medical school, which is 6 years, has done internship for 1 year, which is mandatory, and then in Kenya, you are actually supposed to work for maybe 2 or 3 years before you go back now for specialization in obstetrics and gynecology or whatever specialty that you would like to specialize in. In this case, obstetrics and gynecology. The specialization takes 4 years, and then after 4 years, you need to work for 2 years under supervision before you get now a certificate that you are now a specialist, that you can work independently. Now, once you have decided that, yes, I've had enough of working, I want to sub-specialize now, and there are sub-specialties in obstetrics and gynecology. And these sub-specialties are, for example, gynecological oncology. These are the doctors who are gynecologists who basically deal with cancers of the reproductive system in women. They are fertility specialists like myself, for example, where we deal with patients who are having problems getting pregnant, and we try and assist them in getting pregnant. And there are other subspecialties, for example, maternal fetal medicine, where they deal with some of the very complicated cases during pregnancy. I'm sure you heard about the intrauterine transfusion of blood, which was done in Kenyatta just the other day. These are our colleagues. I mean, it's a big step for us to do something like that in a public hospital, and I'm sure we can do a lot more. And I hope that some of these things can also be present in other facilities.
So how many years to get that certificate? For now, the subspecialty.
For the subspecialty, it's called a fellowship, and the fellowship takes 2 years. So we can add up those years to
Hold on. So let me start. Open your calculator, Wanjiru.
It was
6 years,
6 years
university,
plus
1 year
plus
internship,
Yes.
3 years,
then plus 2 years of work,
Yes.
and then you go back to for 4 years, and then you work for 2 years. Then you get your certificate as a specialist. Then you go back as to go and do fellowship for 2 years.
Those are 18 years.
Thereabout.
Good Lord.
Right.
Let me welcome the doctor with the proverb.
Yes.
It took 18 years for the people of Songhai to come up with this proverb. Okay? The proverbs this week, Doc, are from West Africa.
Yes.
The countries of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger.
That's right.
And it's from the people called the Songhai people.
Yes.
It is true that the camel will eventually die, but he will never stretch out and lay flat on his back.
Wow, that's a difficult one. It's just like saying at the end of the day, all of us will die at some point, but there are things which can actually sort of hasten that lying on our backs, or the camel lying on its back, something like that. That is the way I understand it. It's a good example that we chose of a camel, because we know that camels living in the desert, they are sturdy animals. They don't drink water very often, and when they do once, and they go for a long time without food and drink. Unlike us human beings, we are not not like camels. Our physiology is completely different. We can stay for some time without food. Actually, there have been cases whereby people have stayed for 30 days, 40 days, without food. With water, slightly different, a little bit shorter. The maximum you can do, if I'm not wrong, without water is maybe 3 days, 4 days.
Yeah.
Beyond that, your system starts shutting down completely. So, what lesson do I learn from this? That food is important, water is important. Importanter, yes, maybe. All these things are important, but sometimes when we do them in excess, they can actually lead to other issues altogether. Which basically brings us to what we are going to talk about today, about obesity and infertility. We do know, just maybe to lay the groundwork, that in Kenya today, about 20% of the Kenyan population is actually affected by infertility. And that is 20% of the reproductive, in the reproductive age. So if we are to work with the figures, and let's say that the population of Kenya is about 50 million, and let's just divide that in two, just for convenience sake, that would be about 25 million. If we say 10% of 25 million, that is 2.5 million. So 20%, that will be 5 million Kenyans who are affected with infertility, whether it is primary
you're saying
or whether it is secondary infertility.
Both male and female?
Both male and female.
Okay.
Both male and female. Now, 5 million is a very big number. If you look at Nairobi today, Nairobi I think has a population of maybe 3, maybe 4 million. So it would mean that everybody who is living in Nairobi actually has a problem. And then we throw in a few of the other counties which are surrounding Nairobi. Maybe we throw in Machakos, we throw in Kiambu, maybe we throw in Kajiado. So everybody who is within this area actually will be having a problem.
So you're starting with obesity as the cause of infertility.
Yes.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the obesity,
Very
kind
good.
of outlay.
I would like, even before starting to talk about how there is a link between obesity and infertility, I would like to take us a little bit back to secondary school, to biology. In the human body, start with women. The human, there is what we call the HPO axis. What is that? H stands for the hypothalamus, P stands for the pituitary gland, and O stands for the ovaries. So what happens is this axis is actually what regulates how the female body is going to behave, as even the men also have such an axis as well. So around 13 years, 14 years, the body reacts or adjusts itself through what we call neuroendocrine, pathways. That is why you see in teenage, you see the young ladies start forming breasts, they start growing wider hips, and they start having, hair in, pubic hairs, and so on and so forth. This is a harbinger of what is going to happen. So they have started their reproductive life, as it were. Now, again, a little bit back to that HPO axis. When a woman has her period, what basically happens is that there are messages which are sent, what we call neuroendocrine messages. These are basically hormones which are sent from the hypothalamus, which is a part of the brain, to the pituitary gland, a very, very important part of the human body. And what they do is that they release hormones which are very, very essential in the reproductive cycle. Which hormones are these? Start with FSH, what we call FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone. We have LH, we have estrogen, and so on. So the FSH sends messages to the ovaries and tells them right at the beginning of the cycle, it is time to wake up. Those eggs which are lying dormant, they need to wake up.
Start doing warm-ups.
Yes, and as they wake up, several hundred eggs are woken up. Remember, at delivery, a young girl has about about 1 million eggs. But by the time they start their menstruation, that number is about 500,000 eggs. So about several hundred eggs are woken up. But at the end of the day, it is only one egg which will be mature, what you call a follicle, and the follicle carries an egg in it. So this is what is going to be released, such that if there is good timing, if this lady has intercourse and everything is okay, the tubes are okay, sperm is okay, they will meet at a particular point in the fallopian tube, fertilization will occur, and a baby will form. Let's put that in the parking lot,
right,
for the time being. So let's go back now to obesity. Now, obesity is basically defined as having abnormal adipose tissue, abnormal fat, the abdomen, most of the time, and also in the other internal organs. According to the World Health Organization, the measure of obesity is basically BMI, and it is said that equal to or above 25, BMI of 25, it is considered, a person is considered to be overweight. When it is 30 and above, this person is considered to be obese. Over 35, this is morbid obesity. Again, with the statistics of the World Health Organization, about 60% of women in the US, United States of America, are actually obese. 60%. In European countries, it's about 30%. In this part of the world, we are not very sure because we don't have those very clear statistics. Now, this is a huge problem. Of course, obesity also affects men, and it will also affect their fertility rates as well. We'll come to that in a minute. Now, with obesity, there are many things that happen in the system. Some of them very common issues that health issues connected with obesity is basically, for example, high blood pressure. We have diabetes, not to mention the skeletal system, the joints, and so on and so forth. But coming back to how obesity is connected with fertility or infertility, for that matter. When a lady is obese, or even when a man is obese, many things happen in the fatty tissue. Number one, you remember we talked about the HPO axis.
Yes.
There is a hormone which is called GnRH. This is gonadotropin releasing hormone. This is like the manager. So it's the one which tells now the pituitary gland release hormones, at a particular time. In obesity, unfortunately, there is dysregulation of this hormone. The controller. The controller itself. So if the controller is affected, it will affect all these others.
It will not send out signal on time, or it may not even send a signal.
It may send signal, but these signals may not be accepted or may not be felt, and hence there is dysregulation of that.
Or may not even reach.
Of that, or it may not reach.
Okay.
Now, women who are obese more often than not have irregular cycles. For example, there is an issue of polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is part of the issues, some of the causes of infertility. It affects about maybe 10 to 15% of young women who are trying to get pregnant and they can't get pregnant. One of the issues that they have, one of the common symptoms that is in PCOS is basically these women are overweight and they have a hormonal problem, and that hormonal problem is basically connected with the biochemistry in the ovary itself, as well as the HPO axis, and leading to irregularity of periods. I just want to underline something here, that it is not all women who are obese who have issues with fertility. There are, or there will be, women who are obese, but they still get pregnant. But when it comes to obese women, they have 3 times a chance of not getting pregnant, or rather, infertility affects them 3 times more than women who are, of normal weight. And they have these issues with periods. And if the periods are irregular, remember we talked about the HPO axis. If that axis is not working properly, it's very difficult to help this lady and say, you know what, go and try having, sex at this time, because then there are chances of you getting pregnant. Now,
sorry. Before this, already, the process of fertilization already is 1 in I don't even know how many million, isn't it?
That is true.
The chances of you getting of a woman getting pregnant already they're very slim naturally, right? So we're saying with all of these things, it's possible that we're reducing the chances of pregnancy taking place because of these other factors like obesity, like we talk about, right?
Yes.
Even as we go on, could you define then what infertility or maybe fertility actually is, so that we can understand the linkage now between the two?
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, when we talk about infertility, again, according to the World Health Organization, it is actually defined in 2 ways. There is primary infertility and there is secondary infertility. In primary infertility means we have a couple, and here a couple is strictly a man and a woman who are in a relationship.
For purposes of this discussion.
Yes, so that we're on the same page. Who are in a relationship, and it doesn't matter what kind of relationship, whether it's boyfriend, married, whatever it is, and they have regular intercourse. Regular intercourse basically means that they have intercourse 2 to 3 times a week, and a period of 1 year has passed, and there is no conception. The only caveat here is that they are not using any contraception.
Right.
Okay? Now, the period of 1 year is actually shortened to 6 months if the lady is 35 years or above. Why? Because age is a very big factor when it comes to the causes of infertility. Now, when it comes to secondary infertility, basically the same principles apply. It is a couple in a relationship, having intercourse 2 to 3 times a week, and they have been trying to have a baby, through a period of 1 year, and it has not happened. But this couple have either they have a child, or they have children, or there has been a pregnancy before, and now they're trying to get another one, and it is not happening. It has not happened. And again, the caveat is that no contraception, and this lady is not breastfeeding, because breastfeeding can actually help, can actually behave as contraception in most cases.
Okay, that's the definition. Can I just clarify something?
Please. Yes, please.
You talked about PCOS.
PCOS, yes.
And the relationship with infertility. Could you please explain a little bit about this PCOS?
Okay. Now, PCOS, that is an acronym, and the full length of it is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And in medicine, a syndrome has many symptoms, and not all patients will have the same symptoms. For example, some of the symptoms in polycystic ovarian syndrome are being overweight. Some of these women are overweight. Some of these women have very irregular periods, every 60, 90, sometimes 120 days. I've had a patient who had periods every 2 years, and she was trying to get pregnant, so it's impossible to actually, help her without doing a few tests. These women, because of what we call increased androgens. Androgens are basically male hormones. They will have hair in places where it is not supposed to be. We have a beard, we have, a mustache, we have hair on the chest and so on. These women do have, some of them have this hair, what we call hirsutism, and it's not supposed to be there. They have issues with bloating. They complain about bloating, especially when it comes to around the time when they are supposed to be ovulating or even before their periods. They have issues with low libido. They have issues with mood swings and so on and so forth. Apart from that, some of them have issues with falling of hair, what you call alopecia. And this is male pattern, just like me, Amanda, but some of these ladies could be that, which again leads to what you were talking about, mental issues. Why am I having hair where it is not supposed to be, and so on and so forth. Now, interestingly, is that you have two extremes. You will get women who have these practically all symptoms, and you can actually, right from the word go, when that patient comes, when you sit and take down the history, you have a high suspicion of index that this patient has polycystic ovarian syndrome, and the others on the other extreme actually do not show any signs of polycystic ovaries, and it will only come out during a scan, for example.
But PCOS is not caused by obesity.
They can be interconnected. They can be interconnected. Yes.
Are there people, Dr. Ari, who are naturally predisposed to weight gain?
I think so. Just like there are people who are naturally predisposed to hypertension, to diabetes. I think there are people who are naturally predisposed to weight gain. It can be familial. In the family, it can be constitutional. You see, if your father is overweight or your mother is overweight or is obese, then some of these genes can actually be, passed on to the children, and then we have, all these other issues that come with it. Predisposition is one thing, and then now the social conditioning and what happens after that is something else. Because you can be predispositioned, for example, you have a family who are drunkards, but then you make a decision that I'm never going to touch a drink because I can see what has happened in my family. So predisposition is one thing, and what we do about that, which can lead, to other things later on in life, is completely something different.
When you talk about then this fertility, getting pregnant and carrying a baby to term and then delivering life, those are three different processes.
Absolutely.
So what then, when you say having gotten pregnant and then being able to carry baby to term, and then even with the condition, likelihood of somebody who's obese getting pregnant, like we said, of course, reduces the chances of that happening. Do we also see that carrying a baby to term also then is threatened by that physical condition?
Actually, yes. There were studies which were done in the US, 7,000 patients who were obese were actually followed for some time. And first of all, it was noted that the chances of them getting pregnant actually reduced with every increase, 1 unit increase of BMI after 29. And these studies were also corroborated with other studies in Denmark and in the Netherlands. So yes, getting pregnant when you are obese, when you're overweight, is a problem. Remember we talked about the HPO axis right at the beginning. Now, what are the issues which can lead to issues of getting pregnant in obese women? That dysregulation of that HPO axis also leads to the lining, what we call the endometrium, being not sensitive or not having enough, receptors, for other hormones and so on, which actually support the baby once the embryo has implanted. So there are difficulties in getting pregnant. There are higher rates of miscarriage. Number 2. Number 3, remember with a lady being obese, issues of hypertension and diabetes, especially type 2, come into play. Now, during implantation is a very, very interesting thing that happens, because that embryo, which is basically microscopic, microscopic, you can't see it, carries all the genetic information that this baby is going to display. It goes and drills a small hole, a tiny hole on the lining of the womb and attaches there. In cases of hypertension, which happen often in patients who are overweight, this may not happen, or it may not happen well. And as the baby grows and as the placenta starts to develop, there is what is called the vessels, if I can put it that way, are supposed to open up to accommodate the extra supply of blood which is going to pass through the womb. In women who have hypertension, this does not happen. So later on, what happens is that the fetus does not get enough nutrition, enough blood supply, so the fetus does not grow well. We talk about fetus because a baby is after it has been born. Birth. So there are issues with pregnancy, and if the hypertension is high, these patients can actually lose these babies, and they do lose them. There is a higher incidence of them losing these babies as compared to women who have normal weight. There are issues of stillbirth as well. They are increased in women who are overweight. Remember about the diabetes that I talked, the type 2 diabetes. Sugar is basically toxic to the embryo, or even to the fetus for that matter, because it does not have the biochemical mechanisms of regulating it. The fetus completely relies on that mechanism on the mother. So if the mother does not regulate that sugar properly, it will actually affect the baby. And unfortunately, most of the stillbirths that we have one of the reasons is because of diabetes.
And then what are you doing in practical terms with women who either can't conceive because they are obese, or have conceived and they are obese? Because obesity then is social, it's emotional.
Absolutely.
It's also about habits.
That is true.
It's all of these. So what are you doing in practical terms, and how successful are you in intervening to get the mothers, health back to a healthy weight?
Two things maybe. Here we are talking about obesity having a huge role in fertility. Being underweight as well also has a role as well. So basically we are talking about malnutrition, not eating well. So the ones who are extremely underweight, who are very low BMIs, for example, if you look at our athletes who have made us very, very famous in this world, you see they are very, very lean, slim. They don't even have an inch of fat on them. Why? Because this will help them, do what they're doing better. So even them, again, we go back to that HPO axis. Even them, they have issues of getting pregnant when they are in that state. Because remember, the hormones that are actually control the, how the human body behaves, it is basically on fat, on cholesterol. Cholesterol is the core structure. So when you burn all that fat, you don't have it. So you are not going to have, the normal cycle. So getting pregnant is going to be a problem. Again, the same with obesity. That HPO axis is dysregulated. Now, coming back to your question, so what are we doing when we see these patients who are overweight, who are obese? One of the things that we do is, first of all, to try and understand if there is a problem. And if that problem is there, what kind of problem it is and how we can help them. Because sometimes some of them are overweight because of mental issues, and they compensate for whatever issues they have by eating. Some of them are actually constitutionally, big. They're obese. And others, because they just like their food, and so on. Others, it is also basically biochemical. It's a disease in that there are some certain proteins or hormones for that matter, let me put it that way, called leptin. Leptin is the hormone that tells you that you are actually now full. So you may find that in some of these women, they have this problem that leptin is elevated. And when leptin is elevated, it will have an impact again on the HPO axis that we talked about. And in that HPO axis, there's a hormone called LH, luteinizing hormone, which basically helps to release the egg. So if it is elevated, it will affect the LH. If it affects the LH, these women will not be producing eggs. They will not really, so they will not be able to get pregnant. So number one is talk to them, get a proper medical history, try to understand the background. We talked about, now you are hearing quite a number of young ladies have PCOS. We try to understand where the problem is. There's PCOS, yes, and you're trying to get what is your weight, and again, it's a bit difficult when you ask a lady, how much do you weigh? So we try to be as as diplomatic as possible, and then once we have this information, then now we go next to what would this lady like to do, because some of them come just because of this problem. Then we can actually send them to physicians, endocrinologists. And by the way, obesity is a big industry. I was reading in the newspaper, one of the newspaper yesterday, the Daily Mail, and it says there's a company which produces an injection which they use once a week. Its profits rose to 4.5 billion pounds in the first half of this year.
To regulate.
Yeah. And I think it's an injection which even some of the film stars have used in the past and so on. So you see a film
to regulate your weight.
Yes, to regulate weight. And when you use it, you lose weight very, very quickly. What it does is that it goes and informs the center in the brain where you feel like, okay, now I've eaten. That center tells you now you're full, don't eat anymore. So it goes and mimics the hormone that talks to that center, so you feel full, so you don't eat. So it's a big industry. So if the issue is just weight, two things we can do: send them to a physician, try to advise them about their eating habits, lifestyle, just to change the lifestyle. Kenyans, in the morning we eat breakfast, mkate and chai, and we run away because we're in a hurry. In the afternoon, sometimes we don't eat, or we eat some things. In the evening is when we sit down to eat properly. That rice, that ugali, it should be the other way around. Because when you eat like that, you don't need all those calories. So what happens? Your body actually stores them. You don't need them. You don't burn them. So if you do this over a long period of time, you find you've started gaining weight, which later on will have a problem. If there are mental issues, then obviously here we work with psychiatrists, we work with psychologists to try and find out if there is a background to this and how this can be sorted out, and then we work together. If there are issues now of infertility, that is now where I come in. Obviously, after taking the history and knowing what the background is, now I can come in with my expertise, where we work together now with these other professionals.
Could there be a link to diet in terms of what we ingest? There's chemicals, there's hormones in meats, particularly chicken is one of those things and our regulation is not that good. We saw on Kebs this story where they say that even though things have a sticker, they went to the factory once, they gave them the certification, that diamond certification, and then from there on you can use the sticker, but you're not checking. So we don't really know what we ingest. So one, obesity could be linked, PCOS could be linked, maybe even the infertility. Do we have enough information about how what we eat in terms of the chemicals and all of that is affecting fertility?
As a society, the Kenyan Obstetrical and Gynecological Society, we don't have that information. However, coming back to your question, my brother came from the US, I think about 6 months ago, and we went somewhere for lunch. And of course, whatever he ordered, is brought. And then the first thing that he remarked is that, hey, these potatoes are delicious. You can actually taste the potato
in the potato.
I said, but nyinyi ndio watu wa majuu. He said, no. There the food is actually tasteless and it's bland and so on and so forth. Now, it is very, very possible, and I agree with you that it is possible that some of the foods that we eat are not well regulated. We know that, for example, the chicken that we're talking about, the broilers, not the kienyeji. The broilers are fed, in 3 months or even less. Chicken is ready, to be slaughtered and into the market. So in order, physiologically, it can't grow in 3 months. We know that. So what do the farmers do, or what do the veterinarians do? They inject them. They inject them with hormones so that they can grow faster. And these hormones, of course, as we know, they will not be completely broken down in the body of the chicken. Some of them will still be there. And yes, they will have an effect on us. It has been noted as well that some of these hormones that we are talking about have been found in water. Kenyan water, I don't think so, because I don't think anybody has done that study. But in other countries where control is more rigorous, it has been found, because people are asking themselves, why is the sperm quality, going down? What is it? Is it the food? Is it whatever it is? And they found that one of the reasons was that some of the hormones, that female hormones, have actually been found in the water that they drink, and this could have an effect in that. So yes, I do agree with you that some of the foods that we eat can have a contributory effect.
I want to ask, when somebody comes to you as a patient and they are looking to conceive,
yes,
and then you do those tests and you notice, all right, so you are obese and we need to work on that so that you increase your chances, how long would it take for physiologically, like you explained, this control of hormones to work with the pituitary gland so that the release is happening on time? How long would it take to normalize?
Usually, as I said, when the patient comes, when you've taken down the history, you have an idea what you're dealing with. So when we do the other extra tests, we do the scans and so on, we actually know that this is infertility, most probably because of irregularity of periods. There is PCOS, for example, and so on. The first thing that we actually suggest is that we have a change of lifestyle. Just a change of lifestyle. We suggest that if you reduce your body weight by anywhere between 5 and 10% in a period of 3 months or so, actually your periods become regular. So once the periods become regular, it is now a lot easier to now start helping this patient to try and get pregnant. If they don't become regular, even if the lifestyle has been changed, what we are eating, when we are eating, the amounts that we are eating, then we pull in the endocrinologist to help us. Then we can actually throw in medications to try and bring that weight down. And once it is down, we can actually now progress from there to see whether there are any other parameters, any other issues which are actually contributory to infertility.
Must somebody come to you? So somebody is thinking, I'd like now to get a baby, and then they look and they see, all right, I'm obese. Must they come to a specialist, or can they just decide, all right, I want to get a baby, so let me work backwards, like you said, 6 months, work on my weight, 6 months, regularize everything, and maybe I'll start having a baby?
You see, most of the time when the patients come, they have tried. They have tried for 2 years, 3 years, some of them 5 years, and it's not working. And something that is really disturbing them is, I have irregular periods. Sometimes I don't have periods for 6 months. Can this be something, can it lead to something more serious than whatever it is? So you find there is a history behind it. And if they say that they have tried working on their weight and it's not helping, then of course these other professionals come in.
Can the effects of infertility be reversed?
Can the effects of infertility be reversed?
Or can infertility as it is be reversed based on the definitions that you've talked about? Because we do know that there's other kinds of infertility that then there's nothing you can do about them, and then you now bring in other interventions for baby to be born. So these ones that we're talking about now, apart from then, the regulation of weight and all of this, then you can now say a person who was infertile because of 1, 2, 3, then now can be fertile again. Can you say that? And the condition changes.
Yes, we can actually say that, because we see patients who are overweight, who are obese, or who have polycystic ovaries, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and they have the weight component as well. And once they change their diet, they change their lifestyles, they get, regular periods. Some of them actually just get spontaneously pregnant, or they just need a little help.
not fully spontaneous.
Not fully spontaneous, but spontaneous. I use it
or something
in medical terms.
Medical terms, spontaneous in that way. So they actually can get. Let me put it physiologically pregnant.
She's seeing the pictures in her head.
Very
you wake up in the morning and voila.
You have an immaculate conception.
Okay.
Yeah, and then talking about obesity, because in the earlier hour we were talking about the social dimension.
That is true.
Of course, there have been reports about Kenyan women, I think, and men, and obesity. It's become quite predominant.
Yes.
At a social level, are you thinking about any interventions at that level to kind of raise awareness preventatively? Because I imagine obesity is ingrained in our habits even from childhood.
That is true. Thank you for that question. And actually what we're doing here today is one of those things, raising awareness. There are listeners, there are people who are watching on TV, say if you're going to be overweight, you're going to be obese, then your chances of, getting pregnant reduce to a certain level. But there is something social which I also want to point out. Usually, when, for example, when you get married, and after a few months, if a lady has not put on weight, people think that the husband is not taking care of her. And on the other side, when a gentleman is not having a public opinion, they say, Kwani, your wife is not taking good care of you. So some of these are social parameters which we need actually to take into consideration, because we think that the bigger the body, the better you are doing, whether it is socially, financially, and so on, which is actually not true. Now, one of the most difficult things to change is the mindset of the people, to change a culture. And then the other thing you find, we've grown up, sometimes you get like a small meal when you're growing up, maybe once or twice, and then when you reach somewhere, you say, those chips that I used to see when you used to pass somewhere, now I'm getting my money, so I can eat them, whenever I want and in whatever quantities that I want. That chocolate, actually, now I can eat it, whatever. So these are some of the things which we need to change. This is a narrative which we need to change, that actually being bigger does not mean better. It could actually be the other way around.
Same now. Take it to the men's side. Infertility and obesity in men. Is it also a common thing in Kenya? And physiologically, how then does it work? I can see, in the women you saw, you talked about all those things, and the ovary being told now release the egg.
Yes.
In the men, how would obesity affect fertility?
Now, in men, we remember the axis that we talked about? There's something similar in men as well, because we have that gonadotropin releasing hormone, and it also releases hormones, tells now the testicles that now start producing, sperm. In men, the reproductive cycle is slightly different because in women, every month they produce one egg. In men, production of sperm or production or even manufacture of sperm takes anywhere between 2.5 to 3 months. So it has been manufactured, it is stored elsewhere. Okay? Now, when you talk about infertility, obesity and infertility in men, it actually does affect men as well. How does it do this? Remember that weight, that extra weight, especially when a man is morbidly obese or even obese. Kile kitambi, sometimes, you can look at this and say, how does this man carry this weight around all the time? The fatty tissue itself is actually... we call it an endocrine organ as well because it helps in the regulation of sugar, it helps in the regulation of fat, and then in the immune system as well. When a man is fat or even a woman is fat, there are some chemicals which are released into the bloodstream, and some of these are called cytokines. They sort of keep the body in a sort of a chronic inflammation state all the time. So if the body is in such a state all the time because of the overproduction of these chemicals, it will affect the HPO axis that we talked about. That is number one. It will affect the vessels. That is where you have issues with high blood pressure. It will affect the regulation of sugar and so on and so forth. Number two, it will affect the production of sperm as well. Because of this, chronic inflammation state, the testicles will be affected, the quality of the sperm that is produced will be poorer, the numbers will be lower, etc. Number three, erectile dysfunction kicks in because the vessels are not as open as they are supposed to be. They have been destroyed, so it becomes a challenge. The weight itself, even if all these other things were normal, the weight itself becomes a challenge. Imagine you have this weight in front of you and your wife is also doing well. She also has this weight in front of her. It's like having intercourse with two pillows in front of you. The man does not get where he's supposed to get. The lady doesn't get what he's supposed to get, and everybody gets frustrated. So you don't want to have that intercourse. Remember, we talked about the definition of infertility, have intercourse 2 to 3 times a week. So when you have this challenge, you are actually psychologically, mentally, you don't want to go to the bedroom, you don't want to do these things. So it now brings in a whole lot of other things altogether. So infertility, obesity does affect men, or rather, obesity can cause infertility in men as well.
Wow. Dr. Omanwa, always a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, sir.
Come back again soon. And very soon. That's what people are saying.
Yeah.
Dr. Kireki Omanwa is the president of the Kenya Obstetrical and Gynecological Society, and he's also a fertility specialist. He's been here telling us about the link between obesity and infertility.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.